Yes, I can hear you, Chris. Good afternoon.
Yes, I can, Chris. Thank you. Yes, I'm Andy Jewison, here in Owatonna, service manager here, and have been here for almost 24 years now, and for the last 15, focused pretty heavily on commercial sprayers. So be running through some of the setup and operation on the sprayer side of the display today.
Hi. Yeah, Margot Sheik. I'm in Tyler, Minnesota today, and I've been working with Kibble Equipment for about 7 years now. And prior to that, worked with John Deere Company, and pretty much have always focused on product and the technology and all those layers of things that happen inside the cab. So, um, thanks for having me.
All right, thank you, Chris. Um, on the simulator, what we have set up here today is a dual display setup, which you have an option for in anything with a Gen 4 display. So the top screen is the command arm, the display that'll be right on your armrest. The other one would be for an extended display that could be on your corner post. So um, we can switch between those two displays. There's a button right here. So if I click that, it'll just flip flop the two displays. So if you want have something on the main display you would like down on the extended display, you hit that button and it'll put it down there. Your menu button and shortcuts will only be on the main display. Um, and primarily I'm going to run through the settings on the machine through the menu. There are shortcuts built in all over on your home pages to get to a lot of this information. But just to simplify things, because there's so many different ways to get to everything, I'm going to do everything through the menu, or try to at least. Um, so if we go to the menu, we have machine settings first. Under machine settings are most of the things that you're going to set up for your sprayer operations. Applications, which Margot will go through here a little later, are going to be more of your AMS type things, auto track, mapping, boundaries, all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm going to focus more on the machine settings right now. Number of tabs here, just going to go through them kind of one by one. Auto prime. What this is, it allows us to, when you, if you rinse your boom or you've got it winterized, you're getting it out to start the year, and we put chemical in the machine, we need to get chemical all the way to the end of the booms to charge that boom with chemical. So we simulate a test speed and a volume here. And over on the right, I've got a little, the armrest. So the pump switch is right here. We can turn the pump on, which it tells us to turn the pump on. Then the master spray switch, hit the master spray switch, and it's going to start charging the boom. It's going to run the pump. It's all timed out. It knows with your size of boom, if it runs a certain section for a certain length of time, it's going to spray out, and it's going to spray long enough so the chemical that's in your tank is all the way charged throughout your boom. So that's what that does. Pretty handy thing that we have here. So that's pretty much it for auto prime. Boom and nozzles has a number of things on it. Now on our simulator, we do have an exact apply machine here. You may or may not have an exact apply machine. We'll probably get into the exact apply stuff a little bit later, but there are some things here for your boom sections. So with exact apply, we have a lot of different sections because each nozzle body is its own section as far as section control, turning it on and off. But we can still control our sections similar to what the old switches if you had a conventional machine. So with that, we can turn on and off sections from here. There are also some scroll wheels over here on the armrest that can do that, and some boom indexing across the top of the hydro handle. And then there's all kinds of different ways to create shortcuts from your home page. Boom track is next to that. So boom track is our height leveling system. Pretty trouble-free, not a lot you have to do with it. Same thing, you'll probably have a thing on your homepage to adjust your heights, but you can go in here and see some information on this. We can click on it. It takes us into the Boom Track Pro page. We can do some settings, canopy, set our height. If we wanted to run closer to our canopy or ground, we can do that. Response rate kind of tells us here if everything's operational and working. One other thing I'd like to point out is anytime you're on a page on the Gen 4 display, most often there's an eye up at the top, but then there's quite often there's an arrow with the dot above it. If you click on that arrow with the dot above it, it takes us into some more settings. So if you can't find something that you're looking for, just remember that there's another button that we can go to, or that there's more settings inside of that page under that arrow with the dot above it. So here we can turn Boom Track Pro on and off, adjust sensor placements. These are all things, the reason they're kind of hidden is there's things that you typically shouldn't have to monkey with very much, but maybe at initial setup, and hopefully things are set up for you on your machine already before you get started. We try to make sure things are set up properly before you take your machines from here. So shouldn't need to do a lot with this. The one thing we can do with an exact apply machine is we can label our tips and where their placement is. That's under this setup tab. So quite often we kind of know what our tips are, but we can go in here and we can name it. If we had an air inducted tip, we could identify that. So if we had two different number 3 nozzles on here, I could identify if one's air inducted and one's not, so I can keep that straight if I ever wasn't sure from the cab which one was which. So so there are a few things like that you can put in your fence row nozzle. And a few other things in here I'll probably come back and do when we're actually doing the exact apply information. So that's there. This is still more boom track stuff here. And then this information here we're going to come back to when we do the exact apply. So that's under boom and nozzles. Calibrations and procedures. For the most part, shouldn't need to do a lot of calibrating to the machine when it comes to you. Things should be calibrated, but there are calibration things here. Please do not hit the reset calibrations. If you do something like that, it'll probably require a phone call with a service person or a technician to come out to help recalibrate the machine. So I would advise not hitting that. One thing I'd like to point out in procedures, and I'll come back to it here later, but we do have a nozzle flow check, which is quite nice. We can simulate a test speed and see how the machine's going to perform before we ever go to the field. And so this is what I'm going to use when I do, when I show you the exact apply here a little later. Control setup. On our hydro handle, there's 6 buttons, well, 2 buttons and 2 rockers along the right hand side of the hydro handle. They're basically where your index finger would hit when you grab the hydro handle. And we can customize those buttons to be a variety of different things. You can have it close and overlay it on the map on your computer screen. So like right here where I'd hit the X to leave the screen, you could hit that button instead. So you don't have to take your hand off the hydro handle. And then we could set up the other one to page your home pages back and forth. kind of handy. You can actually manipulate the display some without taking your hand off the hydro handle. You might do auto track or boom track resume. There's just some different options. Maybe shift track you put on one. It's customizable for you to do whatever you think is best for your situation. Um, there is a lock button on that you have to unlock. That's on the armrest. If I go back here, I can point it out right here. There is an unlock button that you have to press every time you start the machine to unlock those buttons. So that engine is pretty basic. It's going to show you your hours and your use of power, but not really a lot more than that on a sprayer at this point. Headland management system. On the headland management system, you'll see that you can, there's a button on the face of the hydro handle right here, HMS. And with that, with one press of a button, we can have the machine do a couple different functions at the same time. So we could have it turn on the master spray switch. We could have it resume our Boom Track Pro return to height. And then we could also have it set a test speed. You can select one or all, or any combination of these three and turn it on. There is also on the shortcut bar on the home page, you can have an on off button there. So you may see that on your home page to turn that on and off. And again, you'd have to do that every time you start the machine. And then by hitting this one button, you can do a couple different things at the same time. This target speed here for the field, I should point out on the front of the hydro handle, there's a wheel that will scroll when you grab it. Grab the hydro handle, it'd probably be your middle finger or your ring finger would reach that spot. And that changes our preset speed for the machine. So if I want to spray at 15 miles an hour, I adjust that wheel to where it says 15 miles an hour. And then full stick on the hydro handle would then get us to 15 miles an hour. And we can preset that. So instead of turning this wheel, what I would do is I would set this to 15 miles an hour, activate that. And then instead of having to turn this wheel to set that setting, I would simply hit the HMS button. It would turn on the spray and set my speed to 15 miles an hour. Don't know if it's a real highly used option, but it is there. HVAC is pretty basic. Maintenance, you can create a maintenance log for yourself, service intervals. There's not anything populated into here, but you can keep whatever records you'd like to have in there. Nozzle calculator. So on the nozzle calculator, we can select whether we're going to do conventional or exact apply type things with it, whether we're doing a pulse rate, specific gravity, target pressure, and it'll give us some options here of some tips based on our speeds or gallons, and make a suggestion for what tip you should be running based on different speeds and pressures, rates. So pretty handy. I guess what I'll show you here a little later on the exact apply, we can do it a little different way, but this is handy. Probably tell us if the tip we're using at the time is the right tip to be using, especially if you don't have exact apply in the conventional mode. It's going to tell you. So in this case, if I doing 15 gallons an acre at 15 miles an hour and wanted 40 PSI, the tip, if I wanted to drive 15 to, or at that, it would be 15.9 miles per hour, or from the pressure range, I'm sorry, from 10 miles an hour to 17 would be 15.9 PSI to 46 PSI. So this would probably be the tip to pick for this, this scenario right here. Okay. Rinse system. Most of the sprayers do have an automated rinse system. If you have automated controls on your sprayer, you'll have this. If you still have manual control valves on the left side of the sprayer, you don't have the automated rinse, you would have to go out and turn the valves yourself. We have the option to do the boom only, full system rinse, um, solution tank only, or rinse tank transfer. So boom only rinse would be if I was trying to spray, get done today, and the rain came in sooner than I thought it was going to. I didn't get my tank emptied out, so I still got 400 gallons in my tank. I don't know how long it's going to be before I'm going to go back out to the field to spray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just rinse the boom so I don't have that chemical sitting in my boom for the next 3 or 4 days for the chemical to settle out. And then when you go back to restart, then you get hot spot, or the boom wants to, the chemical seems to heat up sometimes, and you'll burn the crop right away when you restart. So what we can do is we can just do a boom only, and this will draw water from our rinse tank and just spray it through the boom so that we rinse out the boom. Then when you come back, you do your auto boom prime and reprime your boom, and then you can continue spraying. We recommend with exact apply machines that we do a boom rinse daily. The reason for that is there's small plungers in the exact apply nozzle bodies in products like atrazine and stuff like that, that has a clay base to them, but really any chemical that can have a sticky residue to them can plug that plunger so it can't pulse back and forth. It pulses at 15 hertz, so that's 15 times a second. It's quite fast. So if that plugs up or gets gummed up, it can't operate. So doing a boom rinse daily just keeps that those plungers in the nozzle bodies clean and working properly. The full system rinse, we have an option for 1, 2, or 3 cycles. I personally like just doing a single cycle and doing it as many times as you need to instead of doing a triple cycle. And then we have an option for our volume of water that we use when we use the rinse, low, medium, or high. It will probably be somewhere in the vicinity of 30 gallons, 40 gallons, and 50 gallons respectively is what it'll use. But it is all based on time, so there is not an exact volume that it's going to use. But most of the time you can get 3 rinse cycles on high with the amount of rinse water that you have in your rinse tank if it's full. So once it's set, you can start it. There is also a small screen and a control pad out on the left side of the machine. You can start and stop the rinse cycle from outside of the machine, but it will run however you have it set up here. So if I have it set up for 1, or if I had it set up for 2 rinse cycles here and high volume, when I'd start it down on the side, this is what it would run. And we can't change that down on the side. Tank only rinse, I guess you could do it. Basically, once the solution rinse is done, then you'll spray out the boom. Tank only would be you just rinse the tank and not spray it out when you're done. I really don't see a large scenario for that. And rinse tank transfer allows us, if you were trying to finish up a field and ran an acre short on water and you had water in your rinse tank, you could transfer some water over from your rinse tank to your solution tank and then add a little chemical to it and maybe finish out the last acre. So it just gives you that option to transfer that water over from one tank to the other. Spray system. So here would be our rates and whether or not we have a manual target pressure, rate 1, 2, or 3. That can be changed on the armrest over here on the right. So right next to our pump switch, right below that, this would be to spray at a manual pressure, which it would just spray 30 PSI, or we could do rate 1, 2, or 3. Sorry, drop downs here, kind of. And then you can click on it and change a rate if you'd like to. So if you wanted to put in 20 gallons an acre, save that. Minimum spray pressure is how low while you're spraying, especially conventionally, as you slow down, your pressure is going to drop to continue to hit rate. We set a minimum spray pressure in the machine because at 12 PSI, the diaphragms in the nozzle body start turning off, and we start to lose spray pattern out of our tips. So if you slow down enough that we get down to 15 PSI in this scenario, it will not drop any lower. We'll over apply, but we still won't have any gaps in our spray pattern because the pressure got too low. So quite often 15 is where we leave it at. Some guys will put it up as high as 18, 20, but all it does is limits our ability to slow down. So I personally like to leave it at 15. Spray off pressure is the pressure that the machine is going to go to. It's the pressure it's going to build when we just turn the pump on and we're not spraying. So even if we're turning around on the end of the field, when we've got our pump on and the master spray switch is not on, or there's no spray coming out of the boom, it's going to go to spray off pressure. I advise setting that pressure probably about 5 PSI above your average spray pressure. That way we have static pressure built into the sprayer boom. So when we turn the switch on and we get a little pressure drop, we get to our rate much faster than if we were trying to start out at a lower pressure and then the pump has to build up pressure to get to where we want to be. So if we were going to spray normally at 40 PSI, I would put it at 45. Boom pressure recirculation is a new option. It's showing on here. It's not actually, we do have one 2022 prototype that has it. I don't have a lot of information on it right now, so I'm going to skip that. Boom pressure relief is simply gives the machine the ability. So if our pump is off and we hit the master spray switch, what it'll do is it'll open up all the valves on the boom for about 5 seconds, and then it'll close them all again, and it lets any pressure that's trapped out in the boom relieve itself back to the tank. And the reason we do this is if we have pressure trapped or out against our diaphragms on the nozzle bodies and we drive down the road, they have a tendency to drip, maybe get splash solution on your windshield as you're driving down the road with the boom folded up. So we can relieve that pressure by turning the pump off and hitting our master spray switch and relieve that pressure so you don't have that. We do have, if you have a high flow machine, so we have our flow set up. So standard flow would be if we have a single flow meter, or if we're going to use a single flow meter, it's telling us to turn off flow meter number 2. That's an actual ball valve out on the side of the machine. And then there's an orificing valve out there as well. This does show that we would only run in low flow or standard flow with either the orificing valve fully open or fully closed. If any of you have been around a Deere machine for very long, you probably know that we tell you to run this valve, this orificing valve, at a 45-degree angle, and that will cover both your low flows and standard flows, most all of your post conditions. So that's what I would do. But if you're doing high rates, then you would open that valve as well as flow meter number 2 so that you can do higher rates. And by higher rates, I would say probably when you get up to about 25 to 30 gallons a minute would be when you would probably open up that second flow meter and open up the orificing valve. We have the arrow with the dot above it on this page as well. So this is where we select whether we want GPS or wheel speed on this one. If you had a radar, you would have an option for that as well. Boom charge. I would typically run this in manual. This gets a little tricky on what this actually does. But if you were going to start out from a stop, back into a corner and take off with your sprayer, and you're on a rate, when you hit your master spray switch, we have no speed input, so it doesn't have a rate to hit. So we won't have any spray. It'll take a few, maybe 50 feet before we start moving and the computer sees speed and starts spraying. So putting it on manual, what it does is it makes it so if we start from a stop for 3 seconds, it will spray at a pressure instead of a rate. And the pressure that it will spray at is actually this pressure right here. So the PSI on our target. So if we were at 20 gallons an acre, when we back into a corner, hit our master spray switch, it'll go to 30 PSI. And once we take off, it'll count down from 3, 2, 1, and then it'll switch back to our rate. So without you having to hit anything on the side. So it'll spray at this pressure. So manual target pressure, or boom charge, manual, it goes to manual target pressure. Foamer at this point in time, not too many people are using it. We do have the option for auto or manual. Auto does switch left to right as we turn on and off our switch, kind of like a planter marker. Manual does use the switches on the hydro handle right here to turn it left and right. If you leave it off, you can also disable the buttons. So if I do this, then these buttons are just dead left and right on the hydro handle. Sprayer response should be 3 and stay at 3 all the time. That's just, I don't even know why they give us an option to do anything different. 3 is the right setting. Spray system is where it just was. Last one will be tank system, I believe. So if you have automated controls, you do have target fill. With target fill, we can set it to read a sensor in the tank. The tank volume will just go up and down as you fill and spray out. If you don't have target fill, then you would either have, you'd have to set your own number. So when you fill the tank, you would set the volume. So if we were going to do a 800 gallon instead of a 1200 gallon rate or load, we would do this, and then we would fill the tank to 800 gallons. And then it'll still count down from there, but we have to put in how full we fill the tank every time. With target fill, we just hit the target fill and it stays at that red line and goes up and down as we go. Agitation, we can turn on and off agitation, how much we have. We can also turn on an auto off. So when the tank volume gets to a certain level on the tank, it would automatically turn off, and then 3 levels, 1, 2, or 3 there. Eductor level would set, if you have an eductor, how much flow it uses for the eductor when it runs that. So target fill itself, we can set a number, and we have to use the pump on the machine and the side fill, but we can set a number in ahead of time, start it. The machine will draw a load on from a tender truck and stop at the volume that we ask it to. So if we told it we wanted 200 gallons in there and hit start, it would draw 200 gallons until we got up to 200 on here and then shut off. So that's pretty much everything here. We do have tread adjust. We have 3 different preset settings that we can set to. Whichever one we select on here, then there are some buttons on the armrest to run the tread adjust in or out. It'll always come into 120, and it will go out to whatever preset we're set on, and you can change it. You can set the front and rear axle different from each other if you'd like to, but that's pretty simple there. I'm going to go back to exact apply now. So
Hey,
with the
Andy,
yes,
we had a question come in on exact apply, and before you kind of go into the nuts and bolts of setting up the system, I guess,
okay.
the question was, what are the benefits of exact apply? So why would somebody take this option on a machine? And we hear that there are retrofits now potentially being available. Like what models would that be available on, or why would we do that?
Yes, so we can retrofit any R series sprayer. So I believe we can go all the way back to a 2014 R4030 or R4038, and then 2015 R4045s. So the primary thing that you gain with, well, I shouldn't say primary, but there's a lot of different options. But one thing we can do, a lot of people call it reduced drift, but really what I call it is droplet. We can control the size of our droplets. So we can spray at a constant pressure and change speeds. And I can, as I go through this, I think I'll show it and hopefully explain it better. We get a bigger speed range, and why we do that, we don't change our droplet size because we can predetermine what our pressure is going to be. So if we have a tip that we know at 30 PSI has a very coarse droplet size, and that's what we want on a windy day so we don't have drift, we can select that tip, put it at 30 psi, and as we change our speed range, we're always at 30 psi, and the pulsing of the exact apply changes our rates instead of us changing our pressure on the tip to change our rate. Conversely, if it's something where I want really good coverage with like a flex star or something like that, and I want to have super high pressure all the time, maybe not super high, but I want 60 psi, so I really get a fine droplet out of my tip. I know that that'll give me a fine droplet, and I want 60 psi. I can spray at 60 psi all the time. And same thing, as I change my speed, as I slow down, instead of my pressure dropping, it slows down the pulse rate so that I maintain that constant pressure. And I think that as I go through this, hopefully that'll make a little more sense. So I'm back in my boom and nozzles here, and I'm where I kind of jumped over before. So we have an option for manual setup, is what they call it. So on our sprayer boom, we have a turret with 6 nozzle bodies available on it. They're paired more or less, 1 and 4, 2 and 5, and 3 and 6. So in this scenario, I'm going to leave the 3 on the front, and I'm going to put a 5 on the back on this set. And then on this set, I'm going to put, so if the size tip that you're putting on is not showing here, we can always click all. So on this one, I'm going to put a 6 on there and an 8 here. And then I'm going to put a 20 on here. And these colors should match up with the tips that you have and the sizing. So hopefully this kind of makes sense if you have some familiarity with tips on why I sized it the way I did. So I'm going to turn it so that I have a 6 on the front and an 8 on the back. I'm going to turn pulsing to auto. And we're going to go out of here. And this is where I'm going to use my nozzle flow check on the top page. And I'm going to put in a test speed. So right now at 10 miles an hour. So I'm using, so on there, I can pick either to use tip. I can use A or B or A plus B. So in this case, A would be the 6, B would be the 8, or A and B would be running a 6 and an 8 together. So what that does for me is, and I can also select those over here on a couple buttons here to select between them. So right now I've got a 20-gallon rate at 10 miles an hour. Well, probably not going to use this one. I'm going to start out at a 10-gallon rate and see what we have here. So right now I'm at 10 miles an hour, and maybe I'm showing too high of speeds. We have a lot of commercial guys that push up around 20 miles an hour. But here's an example. So it's preset at 40 PSI. I'm at 10 miles an hour. My pulse rate's right around 50%. And I'm going to increase my speed. And as I increase my speed, my pressure is going to stay at this 40 PSI all the time. But my pulse rate's going to change. It's going to go up and down. So I've always got the same pressure. I have 2 preset pressures for that. So let's say I'd like 30 PSI instead. And there you can see I'm pretty much maxing out my flow at 20 miles an hour with this tip. But if I wanted to, so I max this out 20 miles an hour, maybe this is a little too fast of a rate and speed for that tip, I can select B. Now I'm just going to spray out of the 8. Now my bars drop and I'm not right towards the max on that pulse rate. So we can select between them. On the simulator, I can't on the armrest push both buttons at the same time, but on the real machine, if you push both buttons at the same time, it will select A plus B at the same time. So one interesting thing to me, when I first looked at it, as I increase the pressure, the flow bars actually go down. The reason for that is each pulse of the machine puts out more product at 50 PSI than it does at 30 PSI. So actually increasing pressure lowers that that pulse rate.
Yeah.
Lowering the pressure raises it.
Hey Andy, can you hear me?
The other nice part about having 2 preset numbers is, let's say I'd like to run 50 PSI across my field, but I know I'm going to be part of the time, I'm going to be bordering maybe somebody's yard where I'm worried about drift a little bit more. I can go along, when I go along that building site, I can run a lower pressure, drive along there and spray it out. And then when I go across the middle of the field, I can increase my pressure and get a little finer droplet size, better atomization, better coverage, where I'm not as worried about drift.
Hey, Andy, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, I was having a few technical difficulties there.
Oh,
But just quick question, just to clarify for everybody. So that little bar graph on the bottom right-hand corner, since each nozzle body has its own pulse width modulated valve, so
yes.
that's the percentage of time, the duty cycle, right? So that's the percentage
Yes,
of time that's open.
Yes, it's actual duty cycle. Yeah, so it's the percentage of time over a given period of time. So, I mean, the actual time is, so it's at 50%, the on time is 0.033 seconds. The off time is 0.033 seconds, just so you have some idea of how fast that goes. So not even a tenth of a second. It's not one full cycle. So, but it's the percentage of time that the nozzle's on for every second. Yes. So, okay. Was there something else that I did that
I think maybe
missed?
one thing that you went over I thought was really fascinating was seeing how its speed changes and in turns.
Yes. So, there is also turn compensation built into this as well. So I'm just going to start. So the machine's actually showing that it's moving here. We're moving kind of slow, but I think it'll work. So as we turn our steering wheel, the outside of the boom will increase its pulse rate or duty cycle. The inside of the boom will slow it down so that we have the proper rate going on, because the boom on the inside of the turn is not moving near as fast as the boom on the outside. So because of that, what I typically recommend is have a nozzle sized so that when you're at full speed, or you're the top speed you want to go, you're somewhere in the upper third of this chart of the pulse rate of the duty cycle bar graph. So we typically wouldn't turn very much at 20 miles an hour, but we might at 12. So at 12, we're right about 50%. If we're at 50% there as we turn, now we have room for the bars to go up and down. If we were right up to where we were maxed out and we turn, we get some on the inside of the turn, but not near as much as the outside, because we max out before we turn very far. So just kind of the way I size that. But with this, as you can see, one tip, I can select the pressure and have it run across a pretty wide speed range. By doing a scenario like this where I've done a 6 and an 8, I can do 12 gallons an acre all the way up to 20 gallons an acre pretty much without changing anything on the machine, with having a preset pressure in there. Even up to, we go to 20, what'll happen is our bars will max out, but I do have the option to go back in here and turn on A plus B. Again, if it was a real machine, I could actually double hit or hold both buttons at the same time and it would lock that on. But now I've got that, so I can do this and I can go up. So I started out at 10 gallons an acre, 10 miles an hour with this setup, and I'm all the way up to 20 gallons an acre, 20 miles an hour. Haven't got out. I haven't turned the turret. I haven't changed anything on the machine. I've been able to do it all from the cab. A wide range of pressure I can select and have it run there all the time. So this to me is the best feature of the Exact Apply. There is also, just to confuse everybody a little further, there is, if we turn pulsing off and we want to spray conventionally the way a sprayer is always sprayed, for lack of a better term, go back here one more time and turn my turret back. So if I would pick a 3 and a 5 in this scenario with pulsing off, what I can do is it'll show auto mode setup. So I'm gonna just turn on that. I'm gonna allow it to shift automatically. Now this only works in conventional mode with pulsing turned off, but I can set this to shift between different tips. And so right now I'm still on my 20-gallon rate. So if I start out at 4 miles an hour up to 6.5, it's going to spray on this number, this 3. Once we hit 50 psi, it's going to turn the number 5 on and turn the number 3 off. It'll drop to 18 psi, run there until we get it back up to 50 psi again, turn our 3 back on. So then we're going to be spraying with both. And I can run from 10 miles an hour all the way up to 17 miles an hour. If I do that same thing, oops. And let's just select the 10-gallon rate. I can still do it. My bottom speed is 7.8, so not near as low, and we're maxing out because 25 is as high as we can go. But in this scenario, I'm able to take 2 tips and cover a wide variety or wide range. The only thing is as we speed up and slow down, our pressures are going to vary. So our droplet sizes are going to vary. So the pulsing is still a better mode. The one reason why you may use this though, is we can only pulse with a tip that is not air inducted. And currently with some of the extend and enlist labels, there are not a lot of non-air inducted tips that are on those labels. So if you are spraying some of those products where the label says we have to use an air inducted tip, or that's the option we have to use at the time, we may have to pulse or spray in conventional mode and turn the pulsing off.
Yeah, always read and follow the label instructions, right? And I do
Yes.
know some of those products, they do have dedicated websites where they update the approved nozzle list as time goes on.
Yes, I usually Google it and just try and see what's on there currently. And the last thing I will note here is for when you're using the pulsing mode, that you do have the specific gravity that you can change. So if you're doing 28%, the number is 1.28, 32% is 1.33, but water is just 1.0. Because the flow rates are of that heavier product is going to change. So that changes how the pulse mode works. So hopefully that's not too confusing. I definitely, if somebody has some questions on it, they can always give a call and we can walk through, or size specific to a specific machine and product, chemical, and your characteristics of how you drive. I can help you size a machine if you want to. So.
Cool. Thanks, Andy. I think this what you just went through there with the exact apply and using the extended monitor is something that not very many people are aware of. So that was awesome.
Yeah, and if you have an extended monitor and an actual machine, and you go out and sit there and you put an exact apply page on your extended monitor, go into boom and calibrations, and set your nozzle flow check, go in there and change your speeds. This will do the exact same thing with just the key switch on, sitting with a machine in the shed, in the yard, wherever, and you can run through that just like I just did. So.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think we're going to switch gears here and we're going to turn it over to Margot to talk through some of the application areas of the Gen 4.
Yeah, let me get my screen sharing here so I can regain control. And give me a minute. Here we go. I minimized it and I lost it there for a second. Okay. Okay, so we should be looking at my screen now, and we're looking at one of our kibble equipment guides. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, if you could just make it a little bit smaller on your scale there for your...
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. How about that?
There we go.
There we go. I knew I was missing a step here. So we're going to get kicked off and we're going to roll through the applications portion of the display. And I'm going to kind of go through it as we would maybe starting our day, and all the things that are necessary to get going in a day, or per field, right? So that we are documenting what we're doing and we've got all of our auto track dialed in and all that good stuff. So this is our kibble equipment on our website, which has recently changed, but there's a resources section, and we have put together some sprayer guides. We have planter guides out there too, combine guides. But recently on the website today is some sprayer guides. So a lot of the things that we're reviewing today on the simulator, we kind of walk through these kind of step by step. This is just a quick reference. It's a PDF, so you can download it and put it on your phone, iPad. It's kind of handy that way. And that's what I'm looking at here. And I just wanted to review with you how you import data in. So a lot of you guys are working at the co-op, and you are getting prescriptions sent to you. You're getting field information sent to you from the office with wireless data transfer. It's getting sent to your machine, but you as an operator still have to navigate to the file manager inside our monitor to actually apply the setup data. So we get there by hitting our menu button over in the right-hand corner. And then we went inside applications, and then we went inside the file manager. And this is where you can then import when it's received from your My John Deere account wirelessly. You'll have an option right here to select this and hit next, and then go ahead and import the data. So that's how that is done. So I wanted to just kind of show you the guide and that resource there to get us going here. So I'm going to get out of this and then jump over to the simulator here, and I've got it laid out very similar to how Andy did. And I've got my main screen that's on my armrest here at the top, and then we have the spraying tab on the extended monitor. So I'm going to first start with just this shortcut bar down here at the bottom and kind of walk through how we can customize this, because there's a couple buttons that you guys like that we hear about that you might want on the bottom. So in order to customize home pages or shortcut bars, we can hit the menu button, and then we can go to the application section and then jog down to the layout manager. And then inside the layout manager, currently we have 3 run pages in our set, and then those are default from Deere. So you can customize those if you'd like by simply adding a new one or editing a current one, just renaming it and kind of, adjusting, tweaking it a bit, and then saving it back to your set. To do a shortcut bar, we're going to have to take our default shortcut bar here and hit the edit button. And we can take any of these sections, right, and pull them off. So I always pull off help, not because I don't like to read the help, but help is kind of embedded inside every app at the top of our screen. I'll show you where that is. So usually you don't need a shortcut bar for that. I can pull that off. And then now I can come back up here in this open spot, hit the plus sign, and go ahead and put something else in. So Andy talked about potentially putting AMS or HMS in there. One thing that I see sometimes is you guys want to create some boundaries when you're out there. You need to get some acres for the field, or you want to get that done. So there is a hotkey for starting a boundary recording that I can put on my shortcut bar. So I've added that. I can go ahead and hit save, and then go ahead and X out of the layout manager, back out of my menu, and now I do have that boundary creation button here. So another request I get a lot, each year you guys want to maintain your customer list or your farm and field list. There is a way to do a factory reset on these monitors, but when we do that, we wipe out calibrations and we wipe out all the good stuff that you've done to tune your machine with measurements and things like that. So we try not to, that's one way to get everything off the monitor. But the other way to do that is if we go into the menu button, applications, and then go ahead and hit the field and boundaries app. You can manage your client farm field list inside here. So if I hit the manage button down here, first things first, anything that's selected, you're not going to be able to edit or delete. So you would have to clear all your selections, but then you can certainly come in here under edit clients. And of course, this is a simulator. I only have one in here, but if you had, several clients in here and you wanted to clean the list and get ready for the new stuff, we could come in here, select it, and then delete it. So this is a simulator. It would be available as long as it's not selected. If you're going to do this, start at the client structure, because then when you delete the client, it will delete all the farms and fields underneath it. If you want to keep the client and you just want to get rid of the fields, then you might be deleting them by the field. So just remember, they all reside inside one another. So that's how we do that. Wanted to show that quick why we're here too. And then also, this is the fields and boundaries section is where we also, once we load in the client farm field that we're working in today, this is where we can go ahead and hit this box in the middle. And I already have a boundary identified here, but if I wanted to add an interior boundary, or if I wanted to create a new boundary, I sure could do that from the fields and boundaries app in our monitor. So when you create boundaries, once you start them, you have the ability to pause them at any point in time. And if you pause and then restart that recording, so say you're going to spray into a corner, you might want to pause, turn around, back in, then resume that recording. And it'll just, snap a straight line between the two pause and record points in that example. So that's
and Margo,
yeah.
I know some custom applicators that they'll use this. They get a work order saying, this is a 60-acre field, and then once they hit the field, they'll make a boundary around their first pass, so then they have a better idea of what that last load is.
Yeah.
And especially with exact apply, it makes it really accurate.
Yep, absolutely. It does help us count what's left and know how much we need to push on. So I'm going to navigate now away from the field and boundary section. And because I wanted to call out those two little points quick, but now I'm going to just basically kind of get my mindset. I've pulled into the field, and now I got to get my machine set up for the job ahead of me. So get to know this button down in the left-hand corner. If you use this setup button down in the left-hand corner and double check everything in here before you start spraying, we should be accurate for our documentation purposes. So first things first, we're going to want to come up to our location and select the right farm and field that we're going to be farming in today. So I'll just switch it over to the North 40. So automatically it does trigger us right back down to the conditions section. So if you need to document current weather conditions, if you're using an app on a phone in the cab and you want to document a few things, you sure can do that. We do have systems with weather. Oh, the name is kind of, I've lost it. We have weather stations on our sprayers. What do we call that, Chris? With the mobile weather? Is that what they are?
I'm 90% sure. Yeah, that's mobile weather. Yeah.
I'm like, what does Deere call it? What's the tagline?
Yeah. Temperature, wind speed, and direction and
so
humidity. Yep.
Those would flow through here. You can also make notes in here. On a Gen 4, the nice thing is things you document here do flow back to the operations center. And then another little perk, if you aren't logging anything here, the operations center will look at the map that's unloaded there from this field anyway, and it'll use I believe it might be AccuWeather to kind of sync up based on your location of the work done, what they were reading for weather conditions that day too. So even if you don't fill it out, we have a little bit of tracking methods there available to us if we need to. So that's the conditions section, and that's right down here. If you want to document your operator, you can do that here as well. It even lets you put in your license number. So, I mean, all this stuff will carry through and be on reports in the operations center. So the more we fill out here, the less maybe duplication or adding of things later. Next, I'm going to draw your attention to the equipment section. So we're going to always want to look at this first, when we're starting the machine, and we look at this when we set up machines, but we're going to walk through just verifying measurements. So you got the same sprayer you were using last year, but it's the first time in the cab. Let's get back into the sprayer profile and just double check a few things to make sure everything still looks like it should. Somehow, inevitably, one of these settings gets changed, not on purpose, but it does. So, but underneath the machine profile, we'll hit the GPS. We'll kind of head to this GPS offset section first. I'll click on that box, and we have both a lateral offset and an inline offset. So this is referring to the GPS receiver on the cab roof. They sit in the middle of our cab roofs on our sprayers. So this should typically be 0 inches, no lateral offset. And then for an inline offset, if you hit the button, we'll get a little bit more detail to edit. And now we're going to be just verifying the measurement from where that receiver sits on the cab roof back to the rear axle of our sprayer. So we'll measure that in inches and enter that in inches in the cab here. But always recommend getting the tape out and double checking this, because these measurements, when we're all done, will have a large impact on how good or poor our section control operates. So get that punched in, say okay, and then of course say okay again, and that will save our settings. We'll scroll down now through our machine profile. Now we're looking at our working with and some configuration settings. This is coming from the sprayer controller itself. That's why it's kind of grayed out. I can't change anything here. If I wanted to go update something, I sure could do that. Typically, unless you changed out spacing on something, there's probably nothing that needs to change here. So, but I would always take a glance at it, make sure it looks accurate. And then work point, we'll go into that. That's our next critical measurement. So remember, we measured from the receiver to our rear axle. Next, we will go to that same point, rear axle, and measure to our work point, right? That's going to be our nozzles, wherever we're spraying the product. So we'll make that measurement in feet and get that entered in as well. So 8 foot is what we got entered here. I might believe it. The boom might sit about 8 feet behind the rear axle. And then lastly, we have mechanical delay. Don't touch this. We'll let you know, this is the old on-off times we used to see in 2630s. We don't adjust mechanical delay. I would make sure that these are pretty much in seconds. If you've got them, if these numbers are in they should be in like a partial seconds or just 1 or 2, nothing more. If you have any more mechanical delay than that, typically a measurement's wrong. We'll show you here a little bit later in the section control app, you'll actually tune your section control based on how big of a gap or an overlap you have, and it automatically adjusts these times for us. So we'll do the measuring in actual feet and distance. It'll adjust it here with on and off delays. And delay is purely a delay, right? So when you cross that coverage and it needs to turn on the master switch to spray, how long it takes to energize everything to push out product. That is purely the mechanical delay here. So we'll hit save on those settings and we'll be finished with that equipment setup. And then I will now kind of move over to the right half of my work setup screen. And like I said, equipment, once you're this is kind of a one and done, unless we're making some adjustments later on for something. But over here, every field we go to, depending on what product we're putting on, you will have to adjust for this. So today we're going to go spray some soybeans, and I have one single product picked right now, and I've chosen what's added in my list currently. If you don't see it, you can kind of back out to all products. You can add a new product if it's something new in here by hitting the plus sign and adding that to your list. So that's how we operate with a single product. I'll say okay. I'll come back now and show you the tank mix option. So you can build tank mixes on the fly in the cab as well. You can also import them in with setup data. But I started playing around here, and I've got one already that I created in the simulator called, for pre-emerged soybeans. And then I'll just hit that one and hit the edit button and kind of show you how I did this. So you got to give it a name. So you might load in a couple of these. You got to give it an overall rate that you want to go, that you want to apply at. And then we got to build what our tank mix is. So first you got to select a carrier. We're keeping it pretty simple today. We're going to use water, and then you can add your product. So I have added Roundup, but if I wanted to add an additional product in here, if I had an additive that I wanted to add and I wanted to go ahead and put that in, I could go ahead and select that and go ahead and enter my units. I think we're going to do this one in pounds per acre, and we can go ahead and hit 2 pounds in that scenario for the AMS. And now I've got a tank mix of water, Roundup, and a little AMS. I can hit save, and I loaded my pre-emerged soy tank mix. And over here kind of is my detail. So based on this 20-gallon rate, this is what we're going to be doing by product for application. Now, you might notice my target rate is still up here at 11.99. That's because down here on my sprayer, I'm on number 2. So I would have to punch in and give myself to actually go spray that rate. There we go. Now we all match and we look good. And I'll hit OK. And yeah, and typically with spraying, you're going to just run off your controller. We don't do much prescriptions with spraying, maybe with some fertilizer applications. And those of you that run, of course, we're focused on sprayers, but our F4365s, our photo type machines, fertilizer spreaders, this is where you would potentially load in any RXs that you've imported right here and pull those from a list. And I even have a few in here in the simulator that I could pull through. I could pull through one of these if this really is a product. Yeah, so this is a prescription, what it might look like when you pull that in. If you are pulling in scripts, it does give you this kind of summary page of this prescription when you pull it in. And I would just make sure in all cases that you always have a plan here for what happens if we potentially would lose GPS. So is that maintaining a previous rate, or do you want a flat rate in there? And then if we get outside of a zone, so you built the script, but the boundaries aren't quite matching up, if you want it to still spray or spread, you need to have an out of zone rate in there too. So I would just pick an average rate so we have product applying in that scenario. So I'm going to jump back out of that and normally you hit save and now you've applied your prescription, but I'm going to try not to digress too far here for you guys. So we'll leave it on controller rate. And yeah, so now I'm set up, got a location. I have double checked and entered any details on my conditions, got my equipment set up, and very important to have my product names loaded in here as well. So when that's all said and done, probably the next place I'm going to jump over is talk about section control setup, and we'll talk about mapping setup after that. So on my homepage, I have an on-off switch for section control. So this is like your master on-off to 2630 monitors. If you're coming out of one of those, it was a little checkbox that we used to check on our home screen to basically have it on and engage. So when it's on, if it sees coverage, you've already been there, it's going to kick it off. Also, just good to note, I had a question about this last night. All of these Gen 4 sprayers, if you've got the latest software on them and you've got those premium activations on those armrests, for the section control, they also have something called in-field data sharing. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here today on that because the simulator just doesn't do it justice, but they should be capable of sharing AB lines and coverage. So if you've got one machine going out to do some work and another one to follow it, and you want to see the other machine's coverage, and you want your section control to work based off of your coverage and the other machines, they should be able to do that. So there's some setup that has to happen underneath your menu button and underneath applications in this sharing app. Okay. And like I said, our simulator does not do us justice. Both machines have to be in the same operation center account, and you have to have JD Link and those sort of things to be able to do the sharing. That's why the simulator doesn't do it justice. But these things are all checked off in green. We should be able to share. Basically, you guys join a shared work group at that point, and that is done over here when we go under location. We get that option to join work from a shared group, which it just isn't working on the simulator. So it's just, I'm not going to be able to do that justice. Okay, so I digressed. I apologize. Let's pull back into section control and menu and applications and dive into Section control settings real quick. You've got your master on off, which we have on our shortcut. There is an option called headland control. So if for some reason you didn't spray your headlands first and you wanted to simulate where your headlands are, you sure could do that. You could say, you could spray the middle of your field first and it would kick off based on offset from your boundary. So 120 feet from your boundary if you so desire. Don't use that much in sprayers. If you wanted to ignore some boundaries or use boundaries, you can toggle them on or off here. So if you've got a bad boundary and you just need to ignore it, you sure can do that on the exterior. Typically, sprayer, you kind of want to use them if they're good. That way, if your boom swings over it, it kicks off and we're not spraying things we shouldn't be spraying. When it comes to tuning the machine, before I tune it, let's talk about overlap settings. So you've got overlap based on coverage, the boundary, exterior or interior. When you choose, now our sections are getting smaller and smaller, right? Exact apply machines, they're no longer feet. Exact apply machines, it might be, each nozzle, right? For control. But if you wanted to have the whole section get through the coverage before the section kicks off, that would be what the 100% overlap would be. If you wanted to adjust that and maybe have 50-50. So you could also create a pattern or overlap plan that's half and half that way too. So those are just some options to tweak there. And it may look different for exterior boundaries versus interior boundaries. If you're trying to maintain a waterway, you might want to have 0% overlap. So none of that section is going to hang in there and spray in that scenario. And then performance tuning. I talked about earlier that we will tune our machines based on distance and the speed we were driving. So if we are spraying and we feel like, say we're a couple scenarios here. So when you go into your headland, you are entering coverage. So we're turning off this machine, we're entering the coverage. Depending on what scenario you have here, skip or an overlap. So maybe we're turning off too soon before we hit the coverage. You would put a skip in here, and then you would say roughly how many feet you're off. So then you can go ahead and tune that. So if it's 5 feet too soon or 5 foot skip, how fast were you doing that at? We'll be doing this at 10 miles an hour. And then we say, okay. So I'll explain this. So it should let you, based on the scenario, adjust your time. But if we are getting information like this, where it says invalid and it could not be updated, either we've tuned it all the way down to we can't tune anymore, or potentially you've got a measurement that's off in that scenario. So there's just no more time to adjust, right? Or delay to adjust. And that probably might be too because of my default mechanical delays. So on the first page. Chris, anything to add here? I don't want to confuse the situation, but did I explain that?
Yeah, no, it's this
Fair
is
enough.
a great tool. Not only with sprayers but planters too.
Yep. So I'll jump out of that, or I'll hit cancel here because my scenario wasn't real. And then that is essentially your section control settings and how we tune those now. Make sure this box is checked. That means we're going to use this coverage, right? So this is the coverage map we're looking at for section control. And next, I was going to jump into map settings. I get questions about this sometimes from sprayer operators as well. So this is different map views that you're looking at here. And at any point in time, we can change. So we could be looking at coverage if we so desire, or you can change out the layer. And if you want, so guys that are running scripts, this might be more for the spreaders out there, not the spraying out there, but they like to see potentially the rate. And then in the background, they want to see their prescription. If we have that loaded in, we're not seeing that here, but you can come in here and designate what you see. And so if you choose your rate here and you want to watch your rate change over your prescription for the fertilizer, that will do it here. And now we have an actual legend, and you can click on that legend and tweak that up and down as well for the appropriate ranges you're going to be spreading. So just wanted to call attention to that. I do get questions on those as well with map settings. So whatever you carry underneath the mapping tab, whatever you carry over here or you're doing in here, should fall back to this home screen, right, where we're seeing it. So right now, this is how you know what coverage map I'm looking at too. So right now on this screen, I've selected the pre-emerge rate map. So this is the map that will be displayed here. I believe if I want to go back to just plain coverage, I sure can just look at coverage and get that done too. So,
Margot,
yep.
the one thing that you will run into, and I didn't discuss direct injection or DI, but if
Oh
you had a
yeah.
direct injection, you could have multiple maps being sprayed at the same time.
Yes.
And then that would change with that little window where you see your pre-soy right there on the upper left.
Yes.
So that's where you could see what you're spraying out of your direct injection 1 or 2
Yep.
on a different map. So
Yeah, same thing for the fertilizer spreaders, right? With multiple bins and then the granular, you'll have 3 maps.
yes.
And it's the same, and it'll come through as 3 operations, right? Because you're
Yes.
doing 3 different operations simultaneously. Absolutely. Yep. So we don't have our simulator set up like this, but I'm pretty sure you probably can go simulate that if you needed to on the 4365s. So and yeah, just to tag, I think we mentioned it earlier, but these simulators that we're doing, if you go out to Stellar Support or go out to your myjohndeere.com website, you have access to these simulators to play around too. So, all right, so we made it through. I'm going to look at my checklist here. I know we're probably coming up on our time limit. I've gotten through section control setup, map setup. Oh, let's talk about auto track. And I think I should be able to wrap up. So we've got some hotkeys here on the bottom. You can start by setting a line over here. This will open up the entire guidance app. So that's kind of a nice shortcut because you get to see everything right here. So we'll talk through setting an AB line quick. So if I hit set track, any existing lines you may have will show up here. If you want to create a new track, we can hit the plus method here. So let's talk about opening up fields. We get questions on if you're spraying the field and you need to go 2 times around with it. A lot of times we'll use adaptive curves because that'll just basically, it doesn't care. It records your pass around the field. And then when you steer in to do your second pass around, that will just basically repeat that last pass that you did. So adaptive curves are nice for headlands and boundaries and recording that and, getting that done. And then of course, when we start to go back and forth and get the bulk of our spraying done, more than likely you're going to do a set track new, and you're probably going to do a straight track method at some point. You can drive the row, right? If it's post-emerge spraying, you're probably going to want to drive the row. If it's pre-emerge spraying, you could probably just key in an A and a heading if you so desire. You're going to want to give it a name that makes sense. If you're starting on the west side, maybe we'll do that. Say okay. And of course you can set your A. And then if you want to just go straight north, you can leave it at 0. If you need to go east, make that 90 and say done. And that will snap a line. Okay. Notice my auto track pie over here. So with our John Deere systems, the first piece of your pie will be signal. You got GPS signal. Second piece of the pie will be, I've set an AB line. I've actually created a line. I got something to resume to. The third piece is this on off toggle. Okay. And it automatically does toggle on for us. And then the last piece will be us hitting our resume switch. And if ever you're confused and you're having troubles, so I had a phone call just the other day, my auto track is kicking out, use that guidance shortcut bar, open up the app, hit this pie. It kind of walks us through what we need to know. And you can touch these and it breaks it right down. And if something is not checked and you've got a exclamation point by it, that's our problem. That's what we got to go fix. Hopefully it's something easy. We just forgot a setup piece. Now, here's where I'll also remind you, if you are running a machine this year and you've not updated your Starfire receiver to the latest software. So Starfire 3000s and Starfire 6000 receivers all have a mandatory update. If you do not get that software updated, we can help you with that, or you can pull it over the air with JD Link. I can show you how to do that too. If you don't get that done, your machines are not going to be auto tracking. So make sure that gets done as well. So that's a little bit of the diagnostics and how we get around that. But otherwise, we're going to go navigate to well, must be having a little bit of a there it is, woke it up. Then you would navigate to your resume switch, right, on your hydro handle, and go ahead and hit that. And I'm not really moving yet, so it might not be very happy about me. Very happy with me. Oh, I got to push my handle forward. Oh. Well, apparently I don't know how to run this.
I think
You get the idea.
Yeah. Need an Xbox
I just want to
controller
push
or
it forward. Andy made it move forward. I don't have any speed. I'm probably missed something in the checklist here. But when it's active, you got the green A, and we got that going. Now, if you've got multiple lines in a field, you can hit this button and swap between multiple lines. Remember, I hit the west line, and now, or excuse me, the one you're on is up here. You're using the line that was straight 0 degree heading that I created west. And then there was another line in here that it was already there. So I could swap. So you can create multiple lines and swap through the list pretty quick and easy. This is the line you're on. This is the next one up in the list. Nice feature to a Gen 4 as well. Steering sensitivities can be adjusted here as well by hitting those buttons under the steering as well. And if all else fails, if you get it all wonky, this restore factory defaults brings them all kind of back to the 0, the middle, and it's a good place to go if you're confused on how to tune in your auto track. Sprayers are pretty easy. Andy also mentioned that you guys like row finder, so I should probably show you how to find that. So under new track, and we should have where is it in here, Andy?
No, I'm sorry. So guys on the 2630s liked row
Oh.
finder. We don't have row finder anymore. So one workaround is to use the adaptive curves like you had showed them earlier on. doing a
Oh,
boundary.
gotcha.
And then what it does is it creates, as you drive across the field, it creates a line. And when you turn around, it'll show you where to turn back in for your next line. And you can just
Got
let
it.
that run as you spray across the field. Because unfortunately, row finder is no longer in the Gen.
No longer in the Gen 4. Now I understand. So so I learned something new today too. So yeah, adaptive curve, when you turn, it'll kind of based on your boom width, right? It'll populate where it thinks you need to be. So yeah, that makes sense as a workaround. Lastly, and I guess just to refresh you guys too, so to get to your Starfire, you can always hit your status button, and this will hot link you over to our VT screen to get inside our receiver. And just to get started for the year 2, don't forget to do a TCM calibration. Hit your setup button once you're in here. So this is where you know what kind of signal you're using and how our accuracy is. I would always wait for this to be at least 70–80% accurate before you start spraying. And under the setup screen, get a good TCM cal in here by hitting this cal button. So I'm not going to let me do it. This might be broken. So, but it'll walk you through a couple screenshots in there as well to go ahead and calibrate levelness of the receiver, how it's sitting on the machine. So.
And Margot, this is a 6,000 you're simulating here, but if with this new software update for a 3,000, we've seen the very first time you turn on the receiver after February 1st, there's a checkbox that we don't have on the 6,000 that says default frequency, and you got to make sure that that box is checked so you can steer.
Yep. Well, I think, checked off most things on my checklist. Anything else? Any other questions that came in, or you guys have, Andy, Chris, you have anything else to add?
I don't think I have anything, so I think you did a good job.
Yeah. Good job, guys. Just to kind of wrap up, just a few reminders. Marco mentioned that the 3000 and 6000 series required software update. If you go to our website and do Precision Ag required updates, it just kind of gives you a rundown of what you need to do. But you can pull that on Stellar Support or bring it into one of our stores for a small fee. We also have under specials and promotions, I'm still learning the new website here. We continue to offer our 4G MTG upgrade kit, which we can do a lot of things that Margot talked about wirelessly, sending files to and from Operations Center, and that in-field data sharing for coverage and guidance lines. And then lastly, with our new website now, we do have a quick link on the top to Kibble Access, which is a free tool where you can register your account. It gives you the ability to order parts, create your own virtual parts bin for common parts you want to keep on hand, and also pull up your old service and parts invoices. So with that, thank you everybody for your time. If you have other topics you'd like to hear us cover in the future, please make a comment. And with that, we are heading into spring 2021. Everyone, please be safe. Thank you.